There's something few people ever understand about awakening. It doesn't make you louder, it makes you quieter. Not because you've grown detached from life, but because you've finally begun to feel it. You start to notice that awakening isn't about gaining new ideas, it's about losing illusions. It's realizing that most people don't want truth. They want reassurance. They want to believe that the dream they're living is still real. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." And that's the heart of awakening. To face your own shadow so deeply that you stop mistaking noise for meaning. But here's the quiet paradox. Once you see too deeply, you can't speak the same way again. Words start to feel like cages for something vast. There are truths so delicate that when spoken too early, they shatter. Not because they're forbidden, but because they can't survive translation. So today, let's go deeper. Let's explore the 5 things the spiritually awake never reveal. Not to appear mysterious, not to withhold wisdom, but because truth is sacred. And sacred things lose their power when handled carelessly. This isn't about silence as avoidance. It's about silence as protection. Because some things are too pure to be shared until another soul is ready to hear them. When awakening first touches you, it feels like falling through the floor of your own life. Everything you thought was solid, identity, time, control, suddenly dissolves. It's not an escape from reality. It's reality stripping off its mask. And for a moment, it's terrifying, because the person you thought you were, the story you've built, starts to disappear. You see through the dream, and there's a deep desire to share it. You want to grab your friends by the shoulders and say, "Look, it's all one." The self isn't real. We're not separate. We're just awareness playing with form. But when you do, they blink, smile politely, and then ask if you've been sleeping well. You can't blame them. You're describing the ocean to someone who's never seen water. They can hear the sound, but not feel the tide. The mind cannot understand what the heart has drowned in. That's why the first rule of awakening is silence. Because when you try to speak it, you shrink the infinite into words too small to hold it. You turn lightning into a photograph. Carl Jung called this the numinous, that sacred, ungraspable encounter with something greater than the self. It can't be taught. It can only be touched. And when you try to explain it, you trade wonder for logic and lose both. So the awakened don't preach. They radiate. They move quietly through the world, not trying to convert, but to embody. Because some truths can't be spoken. They can only be lived. Here's the next trap of awakening. The illusion that your path is the path. You find something that cracks you open. Meditation, heartbreak, art, solitude, and it feels like the key that unlocked everything. So naturally, you want to hand that key to everyone you meet. You say, "This saved me. Try this. Do what I did." But awakening doesn't work that way. It isn't a recipe. It's alchemy. And alchemy doesn't repeat itself. The same fire that purified you might burn another to ash. Because they're not you. Their demons wear different faces, and their medicine needs a different dose. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. It's the same with spiritual methods. The breath work that quieted your mind might flood another person with panic. The heartbreak that opened your compassion might break someone else beyond repair. The path that freed you was tailored to your shape, to your fears, your timing, your soul's design. It was a conversation between you and the divine, and no one else was invited to that dialogue. That's why the awakened grow cautious about preaching, because they understand something subtle. Transformation can't be transferred. So instead of instructing others, they embody the truth quietly. Their peace becomes the teaching. Their steadiness becomes the scripture. Their life becomes the proof. You see, real wisdom doesn't try to convince. It invites. And when others are ready, they'll find their own doorway. Not the one you walked through. Theirs. So protect your path. Keep it close. It's not a souvenir to display. It's a sacred scar. Because what truly transforms doesn't need an audience. It needs integration. You don't share it to be understood. You live it to stay whole. Here's where many stumble on the spiritual path. When the eyes of awareness open, you start seeing everything. You see the masks people wear, how the charming one hides loneliness, how the angry one is really afraid, how the confident one trembles behind their smile. It's like developing spiritual X-ray vision. Every word, every gesture, every silence suddenly reveals what lies beneath. And it hurts, because once you've seen through the armor, you can't unsee the wound it was hiding. You want to reach out. You want to help them shed the mask and see their own light. You want to say, I see you. I know why you do this. You don't have to pretend anymore. But that impulse, however loving, is interference. It's trying to awaken someone by tearing open their cocoon. And you can't do that, because the cocoon isn't the problem, it's the process. A caterpillar doesn't need to be rescued from transformation. It needs to wrestle with it. The friction, the struggle, the compression. That's what strengthens the wings. If you cut the cocoon too early, the butterfly never flies. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But here's what he didn't say outright. No one can make another's unconscious conscious for them. You can't lift someone into clarity. They have to stumble toward it on their own feet. And that's one of the hardest truths for the awakened soul to accept, that awareness doesn't grant you authority over others. It grants you patience, because what you see in others is only what you've already faced within yourself. Their denial mirrors your old blindness. Their fear echoes your former confusion. And that recognition is the real lesson, not to fix them, but to stay humble. So what do you do instead of rescuing? You embody. You model what integration looks like, calm presence instead of correction, honest reflection instead of judgment, compassion without control. You become a mirror, not a mechanic. You hold the light steady without forcing anyone to look into it. And sometimes that means saying nothing. Because silence, held with love, is more healing than advice. It gives the other person space to hear their own inner teacher. And when they're ready, when the timing aligns, they'll begin their own unraveling. Remember, awakening doesn't make you a savior. It makes you a witness. And witnessing is sacred work. The awakened don't expose people. They don't rush others into revelation. They live gently, letting their peace do the talking. Because when someone is truly ready to awaken, they won't need your explanation. They'll feel your stillness and remember their own. So when you see someone trapped in their pain, don't tear the mask away. Bow inward. Trust that their shadow is their teacher, just as yours was for you. You're not here to wake others up. You're here to stay awake, and let your quiet presence remind them that awakening is possible. There comes a point in awakening where it no longer feels like expansion. It feels like dying. Not the death of the body, but of everything you ever believed yourself to be. The story collapses. The roles dissolve. And suddenly, everything that once felt so certain, the me, the you, the world, becomes transparent. It's as if the stage lights have gone out, and for the first time, you can see the strings holding the scenery together. It's not despair, it's dismantling. You've fallen behind the curtain of form, and you finally see the play for what it is, an eternal act of becoming, endlessly performing itself. At first, this emptiness feels unbearable. Your mind screams, "Something's wrong. I'm losing everything." But what's really happening is the shedding of illusion. You're not losing. You're being stripped down to what's real. Try telling someone about this, though. Try saying, "Nothing is solid. Nothing is separate. Everything is just movement." Watch how fear flickers in their eyes. Because to the unready, the void sounds like insanity. We live in a world that worships form, names, identities, possessions, progress. So when you speak of formlessness, people think you've lost your grip, but in truth, it's the first time you've stopped clinging. Carl Jung understood this descent into the nothing. He called it the night sea journey, the dark plunge into the unconscious, where the ego must die so the soul can see. He knew that the void isn't empty. It's pregnant. It's where creation begins again. He once wrote, "What you resist persists. What you look at disappears." That's the paradox of awakening. When you finally stop running from the emptiness, it stops chasing you. You turn and face it, and realize it was never trying to devour you. It was trying to show you the truth. That behind every fear, behind every form, behind every word, there's silence. A silence that isn't absence, but infinite presence. The void isn't nothing. It's everything before it becomes something. And that's why the awakened rarely talk about it, because language is too small. You can't describe what has no opposite. You can't explain what contains all explanations. So they carry it quietly, like a secret flame. They walk through the world knowing, behind every face, behind every motion, behind every grief, it's all arising from the same stillness. And when you truly see that, judgment evaporates. Compassion flows naturally. Because how can you hate what you know is yourself? That's why the awakened are gentle. They don't need to convince anyone of truth. They embody it. They've seen the ground beneath everything and know it needs no defense. The void is sacred ground. It's not to be debated or explained. It's to be guarded, not from others, but from distortion. Because the moment you try to describe it, you turn infinity into an idea, and the sacred into sound. So when the nothingness comes, and it will, don't resist it. Sit quietly inside it. Let the false self dissolve. Because beyond the fear, beyond the falling, beyond the silence, you'll discover something astonishing. The void is not your enemy. It's your origin. And in that nothing, you finally become whole. When you awaken, something strange begins to happen. You stop following rules, not because you've become rebellious, but because you finally understand what the rules were pointing to all along. You don't act from fear of punishment anymore, or from guilt, or from a need to appear good. You act from clarity, from connection, from love. You begin to see that hurting another is no different than wounding your own skin. That deceit poisons the same air you breathe. That kindness is not virtue, it's intelligence. This is the shift that frightens the world, because society believes morality must be enforced, by authority, by law, by divine decree. But the awakened see that true morality blooms naturally when the illusion of separation dissolves. And when you become that, when you live from the self rather than the mask, you no longer need commandments to behave rightly. Integrity arises on its own, like flowers from fertile soil. But try explaining that to the unready. Tell them you no longer need rules, and they'll panic. They'll think you've become dangerous, that without control, you'll descend into chaos. What they don't realize is that chaos only exists in the absence of awareness. And awakening is pure awareness. It's what restores harmony, not destroys it. So the awakened play along. They move through the world gently, quietly. They pay their bills, obey traffic lights, smile in grocery lines. Not because they're trapped by convention, but because peace doesn't need to prove itself. They understand that forcing rebellion is still a form of bondage. It's just defiance wearing new clothes. Real freedom has nothing to do with breaking rules. It's about seeing that rules were never the source of order in the first place. Imagine wind moving through an open door. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't fight the walls. It simply flows where space allows. That's how awakened action moves, effortless, spontaneous, aligned. You don't need to control life when you realize you are life. You don't need to follow commands when love has become your compass. So yes, you still play the part. You follow the visible order, but your freedom is inward, quiet, untouchable. Freedom isn't chaos. It's harmony without control. And once you taste that, you no longer need to shout, rebel, or prove a thing. You just move, like the wind through open doors. So, what should the awakened share? Not their visions, not their methods, not their freedom. They share presence, because presence speaks what words cannot. It softens rooms. It changes air. It heals silently. You've seen this before, the quiet person in the corner who says nothing, yet everyone feels calmer around them. They don't project energy. They anchor it. Their stillness is contagious, their peace magnetic. That's what awakening does. It turns you into a tuning fork for harmony. You don't need to explain what you've seen. You don't need to prove your understanding. The awakened never sell truth. They become it. And presence is how truth travels. Not through noise, not through argument, but through vibration. The world doesn't need more teachers shouting from mountaintops. It needs people who live what they've already realized, quietly, consistently, humbly. The work doesn't end with seeing. It begins with living. It's easy to talk about enlightenment. It's easy to post it, quote it, wear it like a badge. But real awakening asks for something much harder. Integration. To wash dishes with awareness. To speak truth gently when it would be easier to stay silent. To hold compassion even for those still lost in illusion. That's where awakening proves itself. In the ordinary, you don't announce the dawn. You simply live in its light, and one day someone will sit beside you, a friend, a stranger, maybe even someone still caught in their storm, and they'll feel it. Not from your words, but from your calm. Not from what you've told them, but from what you've become, because presence transmits what speech can't reach. It tells the nervous system, it's safe now. It tells the heart, you can rest. It tells the soul, you've always been home. That is the quiet radiance of awakening. It doesn't shine to be seen. It shines because it can't help it. So remember, the most sacred truths aren't meant to be told. They're meant to be embodied. You protect them not with secrecy, but with sincerity. You honor them not by explaining, but by living. When you walk through the world in awareness, you become the teaching. Every breath becomes a sermon. Every silence becomes a sanctuary. And those who are ready will find you, not because you sought them, but because truth recognizes itself. So no, you don't need to reveal anything. You don't need to declare enlightenment or wear your wisdom like armor. You only need to be still, to be kind, to be here. Because when presence fills you, speech becomes unnecessary. The message is already spoken. Through your eyes, your gestures, your peace. The awakened don't convince. They remind. And sometimes the greatest act of teaching is to say nothing at all, to let your stillness speak for you. Because silence, after all, is where the divine still whispers.